Thank you very much. I love this morning the reference to shifting from command and control to connect and collaborate. And really the coalition is a connect and collaborate liberating structure. And when I reflect on where I've been as an educator, because I've been an educator all my life, and a leader in the field of education lifelong. Now I'm 56. And what have I contributed through, and I've championed myself in a sense and felt like I'm doing really important stuff. And I can diagnose and analyze everybody else's failure better than I can share my own success. The realization, the slow realization, and more recently the rapid realization, that I'm part of that problem. It's very easy for us to say, look at the mess in the government sector right now. I believe the mess is equally big in the independent school sector. And the mess is equally big in the experimental frameworks of education innovation. And the mess is essentially that we operate heroically as individuals and we don't like to risk the sharing. And until we as schools that are fortunate enough to have some backing are prepared to take risks ourselves, how dare we be critics of dysfunction in other spaces? Because the dysfunction that we deal with is our own insecurity around sharing. And we are therefore hugely responsible and accountable. More so than people who haven't had the opportunity that we've had. That realization comes at a very practical level when we start a school, a LEAP school in Cape Town, and my neighbour is COSAT, and I have another neighbour called Cape Academy. And in the first 4 years of the existence of the LEAP school, what is my relationship with those two schools, who are doing the same work in different contexts? I actually put them down to say, I don't think COSAT really get this piece around emotional work. Or I say, Cape Academy, are they lucky they can draw from a much wider area, we just work in a narrow community? And so I find a narrative that makes me feel better about my inadequacies. Because I know my model's a mess. And it's emergent and it's making lots of mistakes. But I find it difficult to declare that. Because I'm afraid funders are going to say, oh, what do you mean? What do you mean? We're not backing something that's messy? But they are. Still. Thank you. And so instead of staying stuck in that space and going off to independent schools, conferences and so on, where in fact we're doing a sort of glorified marketing exercise very often on, this is what we do at our school, and we can share this with you, but there's no framework for that sharing. There's no document that comes my way. It's like a marketing document. And I can't get under the skin of what went wrong when we started this damn part of this journey. And what are we learning as we go, and what can we now share with you is, don't do that when you start doing this. Do that, try that. But that's no-go. Don't repeat that. We've learned that. And so I'm kind of rage a bit about independent schooling in this country, because what does it present this country right now as solutions? Other than to be a mirror for how ineffectual the rest are. That's not helpful. So this coalition is a real, sincere attempt to own our role in the problem of South African education, which builds around a fragmented boutique creation rather than an integrated, systemic layer. And we're only small. But boy, did we learn quickly in that context. And did we suddenly, George Harris, where's George? We invited, he's not here, from Livorno, we invited George and invited Oprah Winfrey. And before I met George and actually sat in a room with George, I probably criticized him 50 times. Without knowing him. The king of the buffet spent a whole lot of money. He should have invested that. We could have done 50 schools for that price. And the minute George came into the room, invited to join the coalition, and he too was tentative, saying, look, is this really space for me or not? Are we going to be asked for money in this context? Because we kind of got richer veins of platinum in our underbellies. And so these people may have expectations. Instead of that, George is looking and saying, we're battling in the classroom with maths and science. We've got all this stuff, but we haven't mastered the teaching and learning space. And we're actually hiding that by redirecting children from science to something else. Wow! So we have the same challenges. And the same with the Oprah Winfrey Academy. So we put an unlikely community of practice together as a model for what could be done in a district. It's a model as to what could be done in a region with people who declare their intent to transform their schools. Don't wait for people to come and tell us how to do it. Create the community of practice with high expectations around sharing and around building trust and about getting into streams of work together. It's liberating. We don't need the experts. We've had the experts. We've invited the experts. We invited the author or the sort of originator of the Teach Like a Champion book, and he came, and Norman Atkins, and he really rapped us on the knuckles for not spending enough time in the classroom as leaders. He said to me in a conversation, so what percentage of your time as a school leader have you spent sitting in a classroom? So I'll quickly reverse it because I'm defensive after all these years. And I think, well, how many times in my class as a teacher did somebody bother to come and sit in my class? Okay? And I know the answer is 0.0000001 of the time that I taught was I observed. And did I have any reflection from anybody? But they all knew whether I was good or bad, because they were subversively collecting data from children, from parents, and kind of stacking their little narrative as to whether I was a good teacher. And he said, well, instructional leaders in the schools in which he operates, which is the Uncommon Schools Alliance, very similar, and we borrowed heavily from that group, spend 60% of their time in classrooms. And so we said this in the coalition, all the leaders who are very good at operational leadership, because that's how we measure our success. Did the assembly go well? Did the day start well? You know, did we get the sequence right today? Did the bells ring on time? Did we have lunch? All those beautiful operational things. They keep us so busy. He said 60%, so the leaders all said, it's not possible. They don't understand our context. But they do understand our context. We're fiddling around with the operational issues that, in fact, as leaders, you can defer to multi-layers of leadership in your school and get the focus right, the teaching, the learning, the teaching, the... So what does it mean to be an instructional leader? Age 50, I say, what's an instructional leader? I've been let down by my own country in this area. And I've been part of that because I've taught others how to be operational leaders and to measure their leadership styles and look at democratic, dictatorial, you know, all that, the lion tamer, all that wonderful soft stuff. But I've never sat and talked about how do you shift teacher behavior. The coalition is about shifting teacher behavior. And our own. So it's no, I have to start there vulnerable. And you've had that reflected today. The one area that is very intriguing to us as schools, and it was raised this morning, is the area of leadership. So we've explored in the international models what charter school organizations are doing to develop new layers of leadership. So we've been off to KIP. There's the KIP Foundation. We've done the work in Norman Atkins' schools, been to North Star Academy. We've covered quite a lot of the frameworks and then realized these guys have stopped seeing teaching as an intellectual exercise and have begun to see the teacher as technician. Now again, that's like a mindset shift. Instead of me being there, you're lucky to have me as a maths teacher, because only 5% of the teachers in this country can teach maths, and only 0.3% of them teach it well, and actually only 0.01% teach it as well as I do. So be grateful for the fact that I, as a teacher-centered teacher, am going to bless you with my gems for the next 40 minutes. And no amount of the child saying, but I don't understand, shifts that behavior. Teacher walks out diagnosing these children. They weren't prepared well by the primary schools. Problem restated. Go into these frameworks like the academies and charter school and this research and development layer, and they're not allowing that conversation. They're saying, so what do we do with that child? What's the appropriate intervention? What are the multi-layers of intervention we can use? Intervention? What's that mean? Does that mean punishment? Do we send them to detention? Good English system kicking into the South African psyche. That's what we mean by it. Send him home. Punish, and then hope that he'll come back and work harder, even though he's struggling to make the transition from concrete thinking to abstract thinking. Nobody's diagnosed that is the problem. And that the appropriate intervention is to go back to the tools that can unlock the abstraction process. And that requires differentiated classrooms. Whoa! They expect us to do that as well. Yes, because we're not actually caring for our children. We either teach to the top end, the bottom end, or the middle. And we blame whoever doesn't fit in with our teaching style as rude or passive-aggressive. So we've sent, through the coalition and through LEAP in particular in this case, and the Michael and Susan Dole Foundation support, 5 of our young leaders, very young, somewhere in the age between 24 and 30, into the KIP Foundation, immersed them in their leadership training programs for 6 months. And what is different about the KIP Foundation leadership training program and the Graduate School of Business's training programs for educators is that the educating happens in the schools, which is why our coalition is so school-bound. We do everything in the schools. So residencies are the space where the leaders are trained in the context of high-performing schools. So you take a leader age 25, you say, let's do a little bit of diagnostic work around this leader's strengths and experience and capacity, and then let's target this leader to spend 4 weeks in a performing school where the areas of inadequacy are visible in that school, put them in there and make them work in that space, engaging with students and leaders and teachers, and let them come back and develop a school improvement plan building on that experience. Wow. Don't put them in a classroom and teach them more about pedagogy, methodology, content. Put them in learning space where it's active, rubbing shoulders with real leaders and educators who are grappling, but who are taking risks and who are reflecting and sharing. Isn't that a culture we want? Who's going to lead that culture? It doesn't get led by policy. It gets led by action and by groups prepared to lead that action. So we now believe that in the next few years, starting even possibly with a pilot next year, that we're going to find a way of developing a leadership, our own internal leadership training program, which will maybe have 3 or 4 residencies where somebody from LEAP, I know that Judy's very organized and the school is very structured. We've got some young leaders who can't spell structure, but who lead with a bit of innovation and energy. What they need is to smell, taste, eat structure and have Judy, pulling her glasses to the end of her nose as they're experiencing that, so that they get it. Can't teach that in a classroom, can't teach that in my office, can't teach that in my school. But the minute he's there and he's reflecting, or she's reflecting, saying, yeah, this is terrible, I don't even understand what's going on here. There's the learning, complete surrender, and then the rebuild. And we're looking for support for that. We think that from this coalition we can establish initially a pilot and develop a platform for national leadership development, which is targeted at young leaders. Trying to renovate the 56-year-olds, it's limited work. It's sad and slow. But take the 25 to 30-year-olds and watch how quickly they take it on. And watch how quickly they will learn from the master teachers and the master leaders. So that's a real big chunk of work that we think will emerge, and we're prepared to front it. As a model, we think that if we were to take a district like Mary Metcalfe's project, district by district, and one of the elements we think we can bring into that project is to say, bring the people in the district into a community of practice, structure it with outcomes and expectations, create shared accountability. I now can't ignore COSAT. I've done a peer review with COSAT. I know Fadila's problem. She's been in the mess of my school, one of the schools, and she knows the mess. We know the mess. So you can say, how's it going with so-and-so? The discourse is at a completely different level. And it's real difficult conversation, not nice, comfortable conversation. We do believe we have an advocacy role. And in the collection of those schools, here we are. We stand with a sense of aligned purpose. And we would like to be part of taking the CDE report and driving it as hard as we can in whatever forums we can. And we will do that to create the unlocking mechanisms to start new schools in a new format where they're more sustainable than ours are, because we rely so heavily on external funding to create access to the poorest of the poor, whether we're doing that as part of what we do or whether we're doing it as the whole. So we need to strengthen our advocacy platform, and we're busy looking at ways to that. And from this meeting we're going to Diepsloot, where we're going to spend the rest of the afternoon and evening and tomorrow really focusing on how we're going to do that. How we're going to do the advocacy, how we're going to do the leadership, how we're going to share the peer review learning in such a way that it can be used district by district, or can be used in projects like the Free State or Lebone or whatever, so that we are the R&D arm that we claim to be, but we are structuring it with knowledge well managed so that it can be shared. So my ask is, we're doing this on a budget of somewhere between 2 and 2.5 million a year. If we to take it to the leadership levels and to begin to move people around and do internships, whether they be coalition young leaders, whether they be for every coalition leader, we take a leader from another project and put them into the same framework, we're open to that. The costing will obviously have to be taken into consideration. So if you're in a position to consider being part of that and partnering with us in one or more of those aspects, or in the whole, we really believe we're on the brink of some big offerings, and we're on the brink of being able to measure and quantify and deliver at least a starting point to some of those issues. Judy, I'm done. Thank you very much.